right, everyone, we're going to look at Sir Gawain and the Green Knight today. Medieval English poem written roughly in the 14th century. There is one manuscript surviving. It's in the British Museum. And there are some scribal changes in it and so forth, very interesting. But it is not like our last text insofar as it is written in a much more modern form of English. It's recognizable as English. So the copy I have here myself, a little unfortunate, I brought the wrong copy, is the Middle English text, which I can read still. It's not Anglo-Saxon. And I don't have it behind me. I have Tolkien's translation behind me, which is the one I've assigned to you as well for your text as well. So I'll put that up here behind me. Sir Gawain the Green Knight, translated by Tolkien. And there are 4 parts to it, or 4 fits, F-I-T-T-S. And so there's an interesting, I note the appendix includes various biblical texts. Those are rather useful as background as well. But let me increase the size of this here. You can read it there at the back. What we have here is one of the, as I say, it's Middle English, and it is written in the period where the stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table had circulated. In the 12th century and onwards, in Brittany, in parts of France, they were very popular, also in England. There seems to be common tales, and they, as you may know or may not know, I assume that you do, but actually I'm going to assume nothing. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table reside in a place called Camelot, which is a kingdom, or it's a city within the kingdom, and it is presented as a sort of Christian golden age. It's a return to the Garden of Eden, as it were, not in the sense that sin has been undone, but rather that the knights themselves exhibit perfect Christian character and have undone the effects of the fall thereby. King Arthur's kingdom, in other words, purports in some sense to be like Dante sees in Paradiso. Remember that fresco I showed of the city on the one panel, something like a triptych, except it isn't, in which we see the city of Florence representing Paradiso. Similarly, Camelot represents the sort of the city of God on earth. Now, at the end of the book of Revelation, the heavenly Jerusalem is presented as coming down from God dressed as a bride. And what we see, if you look at the Bible as a literary document, as a whole document, it begins in the Garden of Eden. It concludes again with a garden, but now the garden has been built up so that there's a city there. A city in which there are no gates you can ride in, and which sin is no more. The consequences of the fall, sin and death chiefly, have been wiped away, as have the tears and the crying and the pain and the death. Those have all been removed from the city of God, and now we have a grand, enormous city in which all the nations of the earth gather, and Camelot to some extent represents that. And there's a sense of peace in the kingdom, which to some degree is because of the political nature of the Knights of the Round Table. They are at a round table. There's a sense of equality there, no oppression. There is a king, but the king is the first among equals. He's not seen as above the others. There's an equality there. All the same, he is the king. And those stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table are presented in various writers. Chrétien de Troyes, Thomas Malory, that's the chief place where I found them. And then they are contained in various episodes like this one, which are dealing with one episode from one night within the whole group of knights of the Round Table. This one's name is Sir Gawain, obviously. This is very important for British imagination, I'd say. It is important early on. Next semester we'll look at John Milton in his Paradise Lost. When he was considering writing an epic poem, one of the topics he considered for his epic was King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. He contemplated that as the subject matter. He didn't choose it in the end. But still, the fact that he considered it shows the significance there. And it's retained its significance. In the 19th century, it becomes of great national importance again when Britain has suddenly found itself, because of the Industrial Revolution, with a worldwide empire. The empire in which the sun never sets, because Britain is in Australia and in China and in India and in Africa and in North America. It's literally, Britain has spread everywhere. And one of the things that you think when you're from a small nation, as Britain is how did this happen? And what do we do? Because it's not that the British sought to be an empire, it just sort of happened as the nations around Europe spread because of trade and because of colonization and so forth. Britain managed to find itself at the top of the heap. And then the question is, how do we act? And the legend of King Arthur was often put forward as of a means of guidance in some ways. And it became very important in the work of Alfred Lord Tennyson, who was the Nobel laureate poet in the 1850s. Great, in Idylls of the King, it's called. Brilliant retelling. But it's an age of empire and an age when seemingly the world is a better place, because the code of chivalry and the Knights of the Round Table, the sense of political equality and freedom and virtue, is suggesting a golden age. Now, this theme of the golden age we've already looked at in class. I said it was there in Virgil's writing. We didn't specifically look at that, but when we were talking about Dante, I mentioned that Virgil had written in his fourth eclogue this sort of prophecy which suggests a return of a golden age amongst a king who sounded a lot like Christ, or so he was seen. And that idea of a golden age is very strong in Greek mythology. They have a cyclical view of history. It begins with a golden age, a rebellion takes place within the gods and brings about a decline, which gets worse and worse. We saw that in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Gives way to a Bronze Age, and then finally the Iron Age in which we live, in which there's war and killing and oppression. But there's a hint, because history is cyclical, that this will not remain the case forever, that a golden age is coming. And Virgil writes in the Aeneid a sort of the idea that with Augustus Caesar's Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, that maybe a golden age is coming. Remember, he engaged with that idea of a golden age. This is a Christian version of that, in the idea that perhaps in the Knights of the Round Table and their code of Christian chivalry, something of a golden age has come about again, a return to paradise. And that idea of manners as the means by which a man becomes a man is very prominent in Christian writing. It's faith in Christ first and foremost, but also through a regenerated life, a virtuous life. And especially through the means of living in a court. Now, we saw that last time with Beowulf, that around Heorot, right, this big barn court where the king resided, it represented civilization and to some degree light in the midst of a very dark world. There was an order in the midst of chaos and hostility there. Same thing happening here to some degree. Within Camelot, within the kingdom of King Arthur, there is a sense of light and civilization, but outside of it there's still darkness and paganism. It's replicated here. In Homer's two poems, the Odyssey and the Iliad, we see the polis, and in the Greek world, the polis, that is the city. And it's mentioned explicitly in Plato's Republic, which is actually he polis in Greek. We see that there are certain virtues that go with being in a city, and one of them is hospitality. Right? It's important to show hospitality to strangers. You act in a certain way. In some sense, the Odyssey is about the way in which the suitors have been outstaying their welcome and are doing in the civic realm the same thing that's happening to Odysseus as he's trying to come home. It's chaos overcoming civilization. And the man of wisdom, Odysseus, needs to return home because he represents the way of wisdom, and Athena has to show that civilization is the wise path forward. And that's not going to be demonstrated if Odysseus doesn't get home. The world will be characterized by the rule of Poseidon, Earthshaker, chaos. That's how it appears at the beginning, and chaos appears to have invaded the kingdom of Ithaca. While Odysseus is gone, chaos ensues. The suitors represent the breaches of hospitality. They're eating him out of house and home. He comes home and he reestablishes a sort of the right civic order. Now, I said the word there for that realm is the polis. The expectations for conduct we might associate with politeness. It's a cognate word. Politics, politeness, polis. You would find the same thing in Roman writing. Civitas, civility. Right? There's certain expectations on interpersonal conduct. To be civil is to act in a way that fits the setting. Here we have a new concept, however, and it goes with the court, and it's courtesy. Right? The centerpiece of the medieval world is the court and the court of the king. And in the court, you're expected to act courteously. Well, how is courteously defined? Well, it's in acting in keeping with an ideal conduct, and the ideal conduct now is not the king, but rather Christ. Because Christ is the king, right? And the king, King Arthur, in order to be a good king, needs to be Christ-like. So he models that in all of his conduct, in his speech in particular, but also in his deeds. And it represents a return to the golden age of the Garden of Eden when there is no sin. Now, I say that just as a way of connecting various works on the course, but notice that there's also, in the medieval period, this other strain of literature which Dante spoke of, which is the courtly love poem. And in that, there's problems for the Christian worldview, because the ideal form of love there is the love of a man for his king's wife. Adultery, in other words. This is a serious problem in terms of Christian conduct, but it's being held up as the ideal of romantic love. It's a serious problem for a Christian audience. And in this poem, we get both here. We get these two strands. We get the golden age of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Christian chivalry. By the way, chivalry comes from cheval, a horse, the knight. So And the night is marked by, just like Beowulf, the king, a unflinching bravery, willing to defeat his foes, but also proper speech, courteous speech. And above all, fidelity, troth. And I mentioned this last time, this word troth. It's an old English word that is rarely used these days, but to plight one's troth is to give your pledge in marriage, for instance. Exchanging vows. And this is going to be very important for Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, because his perfection as a knight is not only marked by his bravery, just like Beowulf, but it's going to be now more Christian than we see Beowulf is. It's also going to have to extend to his speech, which is going to have to be Christ-like. And his conduct, and he can't break his vow. Very important. We could already see it was important in Beowulf. It's even doubly important here. He must not break his word. And there will be an oath that is administered here that will be the sort of one of the lynches or the turning points for the plot to revolve around. But we're going to see when we come later in the story, we'll look at this next time, because we're going to get 2 bites of this cherry. When that is Gawain, rides off to meet the Green Knight, he's going to meet a lady, and the lady of the manor, her husband goes away on a hunt, and while she's away, she tries to follow the conventions of the courtly love convention, in other words, to have an affair with this man, Gawain. And Gawain is going to be tempted. And how will he respond? Because he's a courteous knight, and as a courtly lover, he needs to show adoration to the woman. On the other hand, if he does that in the sense of having an affair, then he breaks all fidelity with the lord of the manor. So he notices the tension in the medieval period between the courtly love ideal, which is adulterous, and the Christian ideal, which is the opposite. And that's played out in the work. And it's done so in delightful ways. It's extremely funny. And at the same time, I think it's fairly serious. But troth is important to Gawain and his character. And so it becomes so what is Christian truth? Christian truth, of course, is saying the truth, but it also involves a moral dimension, and it involves a covenantal dimension, giving one's word. God pledges himself to his people. He gives his word. And as a consequence, people are expected to do the same thing. We bear his image, etc. But it begins, and interestingly, it begins in the same place that the epics did. First line here, Troy. When the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy and the fortress fell in flame and firebrand and ashes, the traitor who the contrivance of treason there fashioned was tried for his treachery, the most true upon earth. It was Aeneas the noble and his renowned kindred, who then laid under them lands, and lords became of well nigh all the wealth in the western isles. When royal Romulus to Rome his road had taken in great pomp and pride, he peopled it first, and named it with his own name, that yet now it bears. Tyrius went to Tuscany, which is in Italy, and towns founded. Langobard in Lombardy uplifted halls, and far over the French flood, that is in Britain, Felix Brutus on many a broad bank and brae Britain established full fair. So what we have connected here is Troy. Remember in the Greek epics, the Trojan War was seen from the Greek side. In the Roman epic, it was seen from the Trojan side. Now we're going to see the connection with Britain. It's connecting to that same event. And so it's really interesting when you study literature how many common points of interest are connected, and yet they go in different directions. But if you don't see the connection, you are missing the importance of the story. It is connecting to Troy. But this is not an epic. This is one of the things I wanted to say here. We're not reading an epic. The genre that we're reading is called romance. It does have a hero. Hero is Sir Gawain. So in that sense, it's like an epic. It is a long narrative poem. So in that sense, it's an epic. But it isn't encyclopedic. It doesn't teach us about the underworld. It doesn't teach us about heaven. There's no invocation of the muse. There's no council of the gods. The language is not epic either. It uses alliteration. You could see that there. The translation's quite well done. Well, it's easier to do because it goes from medieval English to modern English, and they're very similar. Many of the words are similar. But you could see that. I mentioned that was in Anglo-Saxon as well. It's also in Middle English. A love of repetition of the first letter in the words. Fortress, fell, flame, firebrands, right? You'll see that throughout the entire poem. The other thing about it which marks a romance out from an epic is that it is episodic. It's only telling us one story within a broader range of stories. So if you read all of Malory, you would see different knights being represented in their little tales, and they're all connected as well. But it's just an individual tale. It's not something, there's not one tale uniting all things. But it does contain things that we might think are epic in the sense that it includes the supernatural. The portrait seems fairly realistic, but it includes the romantically marvelous in the portrait without any shame. And that is represented by none other than the Green Knight, who we'll meet shortly. But it starts there, and as I say, it connects Felix Brutus with Troy. Felix Brutus is one of the ancestors of one of the figures that was mentioned in the Aeneid, and also in Dante's Inferno, Brutus, who slew Julius Caesar. But his ancestor, long, long before that, Felix Brutus, came and peopled Britain. And so the connection there is interesting because Brutus can be seen two ways. The way Dante sees him is as a traitor. He betrayed Julius Caesar. He stabbed him in the front, not in the back, but he still stabbed him, his friend. But there's another way of seeing Brutus, which is that he was a defender of the Republic against tyranny, against empire, against oppression, against the loss of freedom. That's how the British see him. So within the British tradition, there is a love of liberty, which we don't find in the Roman tradition or in, and to some degree in the Greek tradition. It's there in the Greeks, for sure. It's to a lesser extent there in the Romans. The Romans, this is actually part of the fight of the Republicans against the empire, and this is why Caesar is stabbed, is to try and stop the loss of freedom. But in Britain, it's particularly celebrated, and it's because its originator is Felix Brutus, who brings the love of liberty across the Atlantic. Now, this is represented today in English history in the connection with the common law, the Magna Carta. I don't know if have you heard of the Magna Carta? Some of you have. Which is a political document, the king fighting with his nobles, and the nobles extracted promises from him that would mean that he was not going to rule as an absolute ruler. There were certain freedoms that would be given to his people, and that is held as one of the foundational documents for liberty. It's there in the background of this as well, I think. A defense of liberty. There's something connected to English common sense, and I'm not going to go down that path and say too much there, but it is there in the connection with Felix Brutus. Note that Felix Brutus is not the one who slew Caesar. He's his ancestor. But still, the connection there. And note this final thing you'll notice at the bottom of the page here, the text shrinks and it presents us with a different form of verse that's called a bob and wheel. And this is the stylistic device that the narrator uses to move the narrative on. So there's a chunk of narrative, you can see the first 14 verses, and then there's a bob and wheel, and then another chunk of narrative, and then another bob and wheel, and it keeps doing this. And with the bob and wheel, it sort of pivots in a different direction. Sometimes it summarizes, but it always moves the narrative on. So it's always a lot of action happening. So the first bob and wheel, Felix Brutus on many a broad bank and brave Britain established full fare, where strange things, strife and sadness, at whiles in the land did fare, and each other grief and gladness oft fast have followed there. So there's this combination of strife and sadness, grief and gladness in the same place. This tension, and these are opposites. And we're about to be told, and that's an interesting first way to introduce the poem, because the poem is going to present a place of gladness and of joy as an unbroken, undiminished reality. But the story at the beginning will present the opposite, that there's a tale of sadness and strife that we're going to find here. So it's not quite as rosy as it appears at the outset of the story. And when fair Britain was founded by this famous lord, bold men were bred there who in battle rejoiced, and many a time that betide they troubles aroused. In this domain more marvels have by men been seen than in any other that I know of since that olden time. But of all that here abode in Britain as kings, ever was Arthur most honored. So he's talking about Britain in general, but of all of the British kings, Arthur was the most famous, the most renowned for marvels. Wherefore a marvel among men I mean to recall. So now I'm going to tell you one of those. So what unites the romance genre in general, and this episode in particular, is something miraculous. It's pointing to, even though the kingdom is said to be Christ's kingdom on earth, there's a sense that it is pointing towards that by the fact that there are marvels that are done. Miracles. A sight strange to see some men have held it, one of the wildest adventures of the wonders of Arthur. If you will listen to this lay, a lay is a story, but a little while, or a song, I will tell it once, as in town I have heard it told, as it is fixed and fettered in story brave and bold, thus linked and truly lettered, as was loved in this land of old. So here's how it begins. So he's given us the two first little episodes and the little bob and wheel at the end, and now the story begins. No invocation of a muse. He doesn't need a higher power to tell this. There's no revelation of what it's like in the underworld. There's no revelation of the heavens. There is what happened here at the end. But he's going to talk about marvels. And this is part of the romance genre. It is romantically marvelous. It's going to tell of unrepeatable episodes by figures that are larger than life. A hero against opponents that are also larger than life. The setting is important. This king lay at Camelot at Christmas tide. This is already a time of miracle, of marvel. God takes on human flesh, born of a virgin. And they've gathered the knights at this point, with many a lovely lord, lieges most noble, indeed of the table round all those tried brethren, amid merriment unmatched and mirth without care. So they're in a celebratory mood. They've gathered to have Christmas dinner together. There tourneyed many a time the trusty knights, and jousted full joyously these gentle lords. Then to the court they came at carols to play, Christmas carols, for there the feast was unfailing full 15 days. with all meats and all mirth that men could devise, such gladness and gaiety as was glorious to hear. Din of voices by day and dancing by night. All happiness at the highest in halls and in bowers had the lords and the ladies, such as they loved most dearly. With all the bliss of this world they abode together, the knights most renowned after the name of Christ, and the ladies most lovely that ever life enjoyed. And he, king most courteous, who that court possessed, for all that folk so fair did in their first estate abide under heaven, the first in fame, their king most high in pride. It would now be hard to name a troop in war so tried. So the setting is Christmas time, a time of a miracle. It's a celebration of a miracle and the significance of that miracle. Already ought to give us a sense of anticipation, because remember in the first Bob and Wheel he's talked about trials and suffering and conflict, but there is no conflict here. Not yet, but it's coming. While New Year was yet young, that yester eve had arrived. That day double dainties on the dais were served. A dais is an upraised platform. The king and the high table of the court set up. Others are there as well, but this is set up and they're on the platform. And the chanting of the choir in the chapel had ended. With loud clamor and cries, both clerks and laymen Noel announced anew and named it full often. Then nobles ran anon with New Year's gifts. Hansels, Hansels, they shouted and handed them out. They're giving gifts. They received an act of grace, now they're giving out gifts. The giving is better than the receiving. And they all wish merriment. Queen Guinevere the gay was with grace in the midst of the adorned dais set. Dearly was it arrayed, finest sandal at her sides, silk. A ceiling above her of true tissue of Toulouse, and tapestries of Tharsia that were embroidered and bound with the brightest gems. Context here, this is the context of the Crusades. References here to the silk. Well, the silks are from China. The Silk Route, the connection there. It's got nothing to do with the Crusades there, but it's the connection of the East to the West. She's got silks. You don't have silk in Britain. So it's come through the trade routes. Likewise, Toulouse, well, this is in South France, again, a place connected with the Crusades. And Tharsia, again, in the Orient, in the area we call Turkey these days, that sort of thing, that were embroidered and bound with the brightest gems one might prove and appraise to purchase for coin any day. So there's a sense of there's a kingdom here, but it's connected to a broader Christian kingdom. And this is the centerpiece of courtesy here. The loveliest lady there on them glanced with eyes of gray, and that he found ever one more fair in sooth might no man say. So the most beautiful of all is Guinevere. The whole thing is an image of perfection. But Arthur would not eat until all were served. There's an interesting but with turn here. It's a funny thing. Till all were served. His youth made him so merry with the moods of a boy. Now something of, again, condescension here. Here's the king. He's not getting served first, he's getting served last. He sees there's a Christian character in this. He's not demanding to be served, but to serve. And this is the symbol of that. It's almost surprising that he's not doing the serving, but he's certainly going to demand that he be served last. His youth made him so merry with the moods of a boy. But there's a little bit more than that here. It's not just Christian courtesy that restrains him. There's a bit more here, and it's a bit of a problem in Arthur's character. It's the first hint of a problem. He liked light-hearted life, so loved he the less either long to be lying or long to be seated. He's got a lot of energy. He wants excitement, he wants conflict. So worked on him his young blood and wayward brain. And another rule, moreover, was his reason besides, that in pride he had appointed. Okay, there's the hint of a problem. In pride he'd appointed another reason. It pleased him not to eat upon festivals so fair, ere he first were apprised of some strange story or stirring adventure, or some moving marvel that he might believe in, of noble men, knighthood, or new adventures. Or a challenger should come, a champion seeking to join with him in jousting, in jeopardy to set his life against life, each allowing the other the favor of fortune, were she fairer to him. This was the king's custom. Wherever his court was holden, and at each famous feast among his fair company in hall, so his faith doth proud appear. And he stands up, stout and tall, all young in the new year, much mirth he makes withal. Now, it's sort of subtly done, but on the other hand, it's unmistakable. This is the time when God condescends to become man. God, who is above all heavens and earth, becomes a baby and born in a manger, right? Which is where animals eat. It's a trough. That's where the God of all heaven and earth is born in that form, that sort of idea, and he washes his disciples' feet, etc. Arthur follows that by not being served first. However, there's another reason, and it's because of his pride. And this pride, it insists on miracles. Now, the glaring contradiction here is that this is Christmas time. It's celebrating the great miracle. And he demands further miracles. And the miracles are there to show, to give him a little excitement, but also, in a sense, to prove to him something that he appears to doubt. Or not to find sufficient at any rate. Not exciting enough. I've done that Christmas thing before. We've all gone through that. Let me see another miracle in front of me. Or let me hear about it. And I'm not going to eat. Now, there's a bit of childish petulance here. I am not going to eat until I have a miracle. I want to see it. And note that the word proud appears here, and it was up in pride he had appointed as well. Double emphasis there. And pride, of course, is the very opposite of Christian character, marked by humility. So Arthur is, even though he's supposedly a Christian king, appears, according to the way the narrative presents it, to be exhibiting the exact opposite of the character he is supposed to. Now, this is the beginning of the problem then, because he also represents the court. He is the first among equals. But if Arthur is corrupted in this way, what's the court going to be like? So note how it's been done. It's already very early on been set up that there is a problem in the kingdom of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Thus there stands up straight the stern king himself. And he stands up straight, nothing wrong with that per se, except again he appears like a tower. He's proud. Talking before the high table of trifles courtly, there good Gawain was set at Guinevere's side, and Agravain, a la dure man, the hard hand, on the other side seated, both her lord's sister sons, loyal-hearted knights. Bishop Baldwin had the honor of the board service, and Ewain, Urien's son, ate beside him. There dined on the dais and daintily fared, and many a loyal lord below at the long tables. And then there is a eating and feasting, and of their service we will say no more. And the seventh episode here is the turning point, because then another noise that was new drew near on a sudden, line 132, so that their lord might have leave at last to take food. He wasn't going to take food until there was a miracle, and now you got one. For hardly had the music but a moment ended, and the first course in the court, as was custom, been served, when there passed through the portals a perilous horseman, the mightiest on middle earth in measure of height, from his gorge to his girdle so great and so square and his loins and his limbs so long and so huge that half a troll upon earth I trow that he was. I trust that he was. But the largest man alive at least I declare him. And yet the seemliest for his size that could sit on a horse, for though in back and in breast his body was grim, both his paunch and his waist were properly slight. So he had the V-shaped. He's like this, he looks like Superman. Right? He's got this thin little waist and he's out like that. And he's green. And he's huge. And all his features followed his fashion so gay and mode, for at the hue men gaped aghast, and his face and form that showed, as a fey man fell he passed, and green all over glowed. Now a fey man is a fairy. The word fey is a reference to fairy. Now fairy, not in the sense of Tinkerbell and the little sprite that you know, Disney, but fey in the sense of a dangerous creature of a different realm has entered. There's something enchanted about this knight, and dangerous at that. Obviously because he's green, but he's a fey man. And green all over grow. All of green were they made, both garments and man. Well, he'll go over the description here. I'm not going to read all of this. But he's on top of a green horse as well. A green horse, great and thick, a stallion stiff to quell, embroidered bridle quick, he matched his master well. So a great green knight, a fairy of some sort, representative of this people that reside upon earth and are perhaps hostile to mankind. Unclear. Certainly not friendly. And very gay was this man, guised all in green, and the hair of his head with his horses accorded. A big beard like a bush over his breast hanging, with the handsome hair from his head falling, with sharp shorn to an edge just short of his elbows. He's got long hair, he looks like Thor. He's got green. And he's got a big green beard. The name of the mighty horse was of much the same sort, well curled and all combed, and curious knots woven with gold wire about the wondrous green. Ever a strand of the hair and a string of the gold. The tail and the top lock were twined all to match, and both bound with a band of brilliant green, with dear jewels bedight to the docks ending. Note the alliteration throughout. On which many burnished bells of bright gold jingled. Such a mount on middle earth or man to ride him was never beheld in the hall with eyes ere that time. For there his glance was as lightning bright. So did all that saw him swear no man would have the might they thought his elbows to bear. And yet, so he's terrifying in his at his sight. They're terrified because he's bigger than every man there by a long shot, and he's green. And his horse likewise. What sort of creature is this? But he had not a helm. He's not wearing a helmet, nor a hauberk either, which is battle array. He's not arrayed out for battle. Not a pisane, breastplate, not a plate that was proper to arms, not a shield, not a shaft for shock or for blow, but in his one hand he held a holly bundle that is greatest in greenery when groves are leafless, and an axe in the other, ugly and monstrous, a ruthless weapon aright for one in rhyme to describe. The head was as large and as long as an ell-wand. It's a huge double-edged battle axe. It's got one hand in one, and the other's got a holy bob. Strange. But he's not arrayed for battle, but he has a battle axe. This is dangerous. A branch of green steel and of beaten gold, the bit burnished bright and broad at the edge, and as well shaped for shearing as sharp razors. So description here, horrifying, and yet he appears to be not there to fight, but what is he here for? He's got the holly bob in the one hand, he's got the axe in the other. The axe is menacing. The holly bulb, not so much. Remember, the holly, which is evergreen, we, at least in English-speaking countries, we deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la la la, and all that sort of stuff, right? Greenery. And the greenery represents new life in the midst of a time when all the leaves have fallen and the branches are bare. The deciduous leaves have fallen and all we have left is green. In Britain, we see it with green holly there, and represents, probably has Christian connotations there of, again, like the Christmas tree, of eternal life represented there. But here it seems to have some other connotations. Now, one of my questions here is this alluding to, and I don't know the answer to this, the episode in Norse mythology where Loki throws a bulb of holly and slays Balder. I don't know if you know the story. You've heard of Loki because of the Marvels, things like that. And he's the trickster and whatever. He's not invited to Balder, the lovely Balder's wedding, and he's angry about it. And he's not allowed to come in. No weapons are allowed. And he just has a holly bulb. And finds out that he can slay him with this, and he throws it at him, and of course somehow spears him and he dies. It's an interesting episode. Is that there is a threat of mischief in his hand? Is that what the holy bulb means? I'm not sure. There's no references to Norse mythology here per se, explicit at any rate, but it could be there. Paganism, confronting a sort of form of Christianity. You might think that it might be there, but at any rate, he speaks. And when he speaks, remember, he speaks to the people up on the dais, the king and all the others, and the king is standing up straight. He won't sit down and eat. So you can't miss him. What does the Green Knight say? Now where is, he said, the governor of this gathering? For gladly I would on the same set my sight, and with himself now talk in town. On the courtiers he cast his eye, and rolled it up and down. He stopped and stared to espy who there had most renown. This is an insult. Who's the king? What's the guy with the crown, the guy who's standing up, the guy, it's obvious who the king is. He acts and says, I have no idea who this is. Tell me who the king is here. Now the king, we've just been told, is proud, so this is an insult. How is he going to respond to the insult? But the tension's in the air already. Then they looked for a long while on that lord gazing, for every man marveled what it could mean indeed that horseman and horse such a hue should come by as to grow green as the grass, and greener it seemed than green enamel on gold glowing far brighter. All stared that stood there and stole up nearer, watching him and wondering what in the world he would do, for many marvels they had seen, but to match this, nothing. Wherefore a phantom and fey magic folk there thought it. And so to answer little eager was any of those knights. Because they're now entering the realm of fairy. The fairy has entered into the world of the Christian world, and they don't know what to do with it. What do we do with this? These are the fairy men. It's like elves. Elves, likewise, in medieval English, sometimes they're friendly, but often the elves are not friendly. They're hostile, they're the fey people. And so to answer, little eager was any of those knights. Hold on, these are the knights of the Round Table. Aren't they afraid of no one? And astounded at his stern voice, stone still they sat there, in a swooning silence through that solemn chamber. You can imagine the narrator telling this as chuckling to himself. As if all had dropped into a dream, so died their voices away. Not only I deem for dread, but of some 'twas their courtly way to allow their lord and head to the guest his word to say. This is irony, by the way. It's all cowardice. Not only I deem for dread, yes, it is actually. They're just afraid, and they're just going to we'll just let you speak, Arthur. There you go. You're the leader. Forward you go. Then Arthur before the high dais beheld this wonder, and freely with fair words, for fearless was he ever. saluted him, saying, Lord, to this lodging thou art welcome. The head of this household, Arthur, my name is, alight, that is, come down from your horse. As thou lovest me and linger, pray thee, and what may thy wish be? In a while we shall learn. Nay. So, when somebody courteously asks you to dismount and join, you say, okay, and not, nay, no, I'm not going to do that. First of all, he doesn't recognize that he's the king there, and now he rejects the courtesy offered to him, insult. Nay, so help me, quoth the horseman, he that on high is throned to pass any time in this place was no part of my errand. But since thy praises, prince, so proud are uplifted, and thy castle and courtiers are accounted the best, so he knows very well where he is. The stoutest in steel gear that in steeds may ride, most eager and honorable of the earth's people, valiant to vie with in other virtuous sports, and here is knighthood renowned, as is noised in my ears. 'Tis that has fetched me hither by my faith at this time. You may believe by this branch that I am bearing here that I pass as one in peace. It's got the holly bulb. No peril speaking. For had I set forth to fight in fashion of war, I have a hauberk at home, and a helm also, a shield and a sharp spear shining brightly, and other weapons to wield too, as well I believe. But since I crave for no combat, my clothes are softer. Yet if thou wilt be so bold, as abroad is published, thou wilt grant of thy goodness the game that I ask for by right. Then Arthur answered there and said, Sir, noble knight, if battle thou seek thus bear, if thou it fail not here to fight. So he's just said he doesn't want to fight. If he wanted to fight, he'd be dressed out for war. Arthur says, if you want to fight, you can have a fight right now. Arthur is, again, shows his impetuous, youthful anger. He's annoyed at being tweaked. His pride's been tweaked. He wants to fight. Arthur wants to fight. The Green Knight doesn't want to fight. So if I wanted to fight, I'd come here dressed for battle. Arthur responds to that. If you want to fight, you've got the fight. Now, nay, I wish for no warfare. On my word I tell thee. Hereabout on these benches are but beardless children. Okay, so having flighted the king, now let's talk about the knights. We got a bunch of men that look like girls. You don't know beards yet. I got a big bushy beard. I'm this big man, and I got these little beardless boys sitting on benches. Were I hasp and armor on a high charger, there is no man here to match me. Their might is so feeble. And so I crave in this court only a Christmas pastime. Since it is Yule and New Year, and you are young here and merry, if any so hardy in this house here holds that he is, if so bold be his blood or his brain be so wild that he stoutly dare strike one stroke for another, then I will give him as my gift this guisarme, costly, this weapon. He's got the holly bob, he's got the axe. This axe, 'tis heavy enough to handle as he pleases, and I will abide the first brunt. Here bear as I sit, if any fellow be so fierce as my faith to test. Hither let him haste to me and lay hold of this weapon. I hand it over forever. He can have it as his own, and I will stand a stroke from him. Stock still on this floor, provide thou lay down this law, that I may deliver him another. Claim I, and yet a respite I'll allow, till a year and a day go by. Come quick, and let's see now if any here dare reply. So here's the game. It's called the beheading game. Here's the axe, and here's the rules. You get to strike first. That's a pretty good game. Hard to take that, not to take that up. Oh, I get to talk. So it's a beheading game, and I get to swing first? Wherein lies the terror? That he's letting you have the first hit. And he's green, and he's one of the fey people. Do you really want to be in this beheading game? You do not want to be in the beheading game. If somebody's going to let you have the first hack with an axe. Well, you know that it's coming back. Because he's not... Sorry? Well, we're going to see that he does behead him on the first try. But it doesn't matter. That's the problem. So you could think that his neck's so strong that the axe is going to hit it and it's just going to go clonk, not go anywhere. It's worse than that. But this is the game, and it's a pact, and they're going to have to give their word on it. They're going to have to give their word as in their troth. They're going to make a pact, a covenant. In old Westerns, they often show the natives of this land, and they get the hand out, and they take an oath, with blood, and they cut with a knife the hand, and they both cut hand and they mix the bloods. There's a blood oath. All right, you break this, now we're blood brothers. Now we're united. We're one, and we're going to swear an oath on this. This is a blood oath. It's going to be made in blood. But they have to keep their word to their covenant. There's two religions at conflict here. There's a supposedly Christian religion, which is marked by the King Arthur, who is proud at the time of the greatest instance of humility in the Christian calendar. And now we have a big green knight who is mocking him and suggesting that he is not everything that he says, and he's even going to flight all of the knights of the Round Table sitting on the benches, beardless, knees knocking, for this game. If he astounded them at first, yet stiller were then, and all the household in the hall, both high men and low, they all shrank down in silence. The man on his mount moved in his saddle, and rudely his red eyes he rolled then about, bent his bristling brows all brilliantly green, and swept round his beard to see who would arise. But when none in converse would accost him, he coughed then loudly, stretched himself haughtily, and straightway exclaimed, "What! Is this Arthur's house?" said he thereupon, "the rumor of which runs through realms unnumbered? Where now is your haughtiness and your high conquest, your fierceness and fell mood, and your fine boasting? Now are the revels in the royalty of the Round Table overwhelmed by a word by one man spoken? For all blench now abashed ere a blow is offered." They're all pale-faced and silenced. With that he laughed so loud that their lord was angered. The blood shot for shame into his shining cheeks and face, as wroth as wind he grew. So the king he's not only proud, he has a temper, gone red-faced. Then near to the stout man drew the king of fearless race. Well, they're all fearful, so again, there's irony in the telling, including Arthur. He's been provoked by his temper, but not because of his fearlessness, because he too was afraid, and said, "Marry, good man, 'tis madness thou askest, and since folly thou hast sought, thou deserves to find it. I know no lord that is alarmed by thy loud words here. Now give me thy gisarm, in God's name, sir." So give me the axe, and I will bring thee the blessing thou hast begged to receive. Quickly then he came to him and caught it from his hand. Then the lordly man loftily alighted on foot. So now he gets down from the horse. Now Arthur holds his axe in the haft, grasping sternly he stirs it about. His stroke, considering the stout man before him there stood his full height, higher than any in that house by a head, and yet more. So Arthur's here and he's a head higher. He's going to swing up at him. With stern face as he stood, he stroked at his beard, and with expression impassive, he pulled down his coat, no more disturbed or distressed at the strength of his blows than if someone, as he sat, had served him a drink of wine. From beside the queen, Gawain to the king did then incline. I implore, with prayer plain, that this match should now be mine. Would you, my worthy lord, said Gawain to the king, bid me abandon this bench and stand by you there, so that I, without discourtesy, might be excused from the table, and my liege lady were not loath to permit me? I would come to your council before your courtiers fair, for I find it unfitting, as in fact it is held when a challenge in your chamber makes choice so exalted, though you yourself be desirous to accept it in person, while many bold men about you on bench are seated. On earth there are, I hold, none more honest of purpose, no figures fairer on field where fighting is waged. I am the weakest, I am aware, and in wit feeblest, and the least loss, if I live not, if one would learn the truth. Only because you are my uncle is honor given me. Save your blood in my body, I boast of no virtue. And since this affair is so foolish that it nowise befits you, and I have requested it first, accord it then to me. If my claim is uncalled, for without cavil shall judge this court, to consult the knights draw near, and this plan they all support. The king with crown to clear, and give Gawain the sport. So Gawain intercedes here and acts courteously. Gawain, the model of courtesy. I am the least of all. If I am engaged in this foolish game and I lose my life, it's no great loss. A king should not be engaged in such folly. Let me do it. The knights of the round table gather, they agree, Gawain takes the place. Exhibits perfect courtesy. Wants permission to stand up from the bench, from his lord, permission to leave Guinevere's side, who he adores as his king's wife, in full courtesy. No hint of adultery there. But he agrees with this. And he goes to the Green Knight and announces who he is, and the Green Knight knows who he is and says that he's very pleased that it is Gawain. The other man answered again, I am passing pleased, said he, upon my life, Sir Gawain, that this stroke should be struck by thee. Begad, said the Green Knight, Sir Gawain, I am pleased to find from thy fist the favor I asked for, and thou hast promptly repeated and plainly hast stated without abatement the bargain I begged of the king here. Save that thou must assure me, sir, on thy honor, that thou seek me thyself. Search where thou thinkest I may be found, far or near or far, and fetch thee such payment as thou deliverest me today before these lordly people. Where should I light on thee, quoth Gawain, where look for that place? I have never learned where thou livest. By the Lord that made me, and I know thee not, knight, thy name nor thy court, but teach me the true way, and tell me what men may call thee, and I will apply all my purpose, the path to discover, and that I swear thee for certain, and solemnly promise that is enough in New Year, there is need of no more. Said the great man in green to Gawain the courtly, if I tell thee the truth of it, when I have taken the knock, and thou handily hast hit me, if in haste I announce then my house and my home and mine own title, then thou canst call and inquire and keep the agreement. And if I waste not a word, thou win better fortune. So if I can't speak, lucky you. For thou mayst linger in thy land and look no further but to stay. So if I don't get up, and then, like, why bother with that? To thy grim tool, now take heed, sir, let us try thine ox today. Gladly see he, gladly indeed, sir, and his axe he stroked in play. So what does he do? He lands up. I'll make a long story short. He swings, and off goes his head. Gone. Falls down. The blood bursts from the body, bright on the greenness, and yet neither faltered nor fell the fierce man at all, but stoutly he strode forth, still strong on his shanks, and roughly he reached out from among the rows that stood there, caught up his comely head, and quickly upraised it. So you have the body of the Green Knight picking up the head by the hair. And then hastened to his horse, laid hold of the bridle, stepped into stirrup iron, and strode up aloft, his head by the hair in his hand holding, and he settled himself in the saddle as firmly as if unharmed by mishap. Though in the hall he might wear no head. His trunk he twisted round that gruesome body that bled, and many fear then found as soon as his speech was sped. For the head in his hand, he held it up straight towards the fairest at the table, he twisted the face. And what does the face say? It lifted up its eyelids and looked at them broadly and made such words with its mouth as may be recounted. See thou get ready, Gawain, to go as thou vowest, and as faithfully seek till thou find me, good sir, as thou hast promised in this place, in the presence of these knights. To the green chapel go thou. Now he knows where. And get thee, I charge thee, such a dint as thou hast dealt. Indeed, thou hast earned a nimble knock in return on New Year's morning. The Knight of the Green Chapel, I am known to many. So now we know who he is. He's from the Green Chapel. He's known as the Knight of the Green Chapel. So if to find me thou endeavor, thou fail not to do so. Therefore come, or be called a craven. Thou deservest. With a rude roar and rush his reins he held then, and hastened out through the hall door with his head in his hand. To what country he came, in that court no man knew, and no more than they learned from what land he had journeyed. Meanwhile, the king and Sir Gawain and the Green Man, at the Green Man laugh and smile. Yet to men had appeared 'twas plain a marvel beyond denial. So the king wanted a marvel. He wasn't going to eat his dinner until he had a marvel. Well, now he's at a marvel. Nobody can doubt that a marvel has happened. The king got what he wished for. Fool. And there's a sense there, again, because the king's character is a contradiction of Christian character, who sent the Green Man there? Possibly. We're going to come to who sent the Green Man there. We're going to find out who exactly sent the Green Man. That'll come later in the story. But is it not God who rebukes the proud? Humbles men? At least a sense of ambiguity in the story here. But we're going to find that there's a more obvious specified opponent here. Though Arthur the High Knight in his heart marveled, let no sign of it be seen. But said then aloud to the king so comely with courteous words, O dear lady, today be not downcast at all. Such cunning play well becomes the Christmas tide. I'm not surprised, don't panic. Nothing to see here. Of course it's happened, it's Christmas. We expect miracles at Christmas. Here was a miracle. Such cunning play well becomes the Christmas tide, interludes and the like, and laughter and singing amid these noble dances of knights and of dames. None the less to my food I may fairly betake me, for a marvel I have met, and I may not deny it. He glanced at Sir Gawain, and with good point he said, Come, hang up thine axe, sir. It is hewn now enough. And over the table they hung it, on the tapestry behind, just like the arm of Grendel. Put the axe up there. Where all men might remark it, a marvel to see, and by its true token might tell of that adventure. Then to a table they turned, those two lords together, the king and his good kinsmen and courtly men, served them with all dainties double, the dearest there might be, with all manner of meats and with minstrelsy too. So now the singers come in and play, and it's eating, drinking, and making merry. With delight that day they led, till the land came the night again. Sir Gawain, now take heed, lest fear make thee refrain from daring the dangerous deed that thou in hand hast taken. The narrator intercedes here and speaks directly to Gawain. That's the end of the first fit. There are four, as I say. The second is the journey to the land of the Green Knight. The third will be the actual interaction between Gawain and a lord of a manor. And the fourth will be encountering the Green Knight. I'll pick those up next time. Any comments or questions about this thus far? I don't want to get into the next two there, but there's a, yes?
Well, it's more so a comment, but I like when Arthur tells
Like a horse?
Yeah.
You wonder, eh?
Yeah. It's like the alliteration on the joke so far.
Yeah. It's a humorous tale. You have to see there's a level in which you can sort of just take it as straight without any sense of interaction, without any humor, but it is, I think the more you read it, the more you sense there's a lot of humor in this, regularly. And you can imagine the faces and the interactions, and there's a delight in words and a delight in the whole play of the whole thing that is, this makes it such a splendid tale. Yeah, I think a little bit of that. Come down from the horse, nay.
Yes.
Right? I don't think so, but still, could be. And again, a lot of irony, even in the telling. It says one thing, but the audience understands something different. There's, he says that nobody was afraid there, and we know that everyone's terrified. They're all getting up. They're all sitting silently. There's a lot of flighting going on. Like, these are men sitting at the bed. I mean, he says that they're all beardless. I don't think so. But he's acting like they're a bunch of children because they won't stand up and fight him. This is how you get it. Like this, imagine in hockey, you go over to the bench and say, come on, which one of you is coming over the, right? The flighting, it starts before the fighting. Nobody wants to stand up to the Green Knight. And so there's something delightful about it. And yet the Christian context is the sort of the backdrop for it. And the question is, how Christian is the Christian court of King Arthur? Is it as Christian as it purports to be? It does in one sense. They have Christmas, they celebrate it, they give gifts, they act with courtesy. There's a sense of putting others ahead of yourself. There's the Knights of the Round Table, there's a sort of, but beneath all of that, superficial, although real, Christian manners, courtesy, customs, is the character matching with that. Because it seems like the Gawain poet, whoever writes this, we don't know who it was, by the way, it's anonymous, just like Beowulf, is questioning very strongly because King Arthur is proud, portrayed right from the outset, which is a clear character contradiction. Yes?
Because the medieval English is so close to what this is closer to what this translation is, are all of the alliterations very similar to what the original was?
Pretty close, so I can read you a passage if you want. What is this, 490? Then to a table, okay. Then they bowed to a board, these burners together, the king and the good knight, and keen men him served of all dainties double, as dearest might follow, with all manner of metre and minstrelsy both, with wheeler walt that day till worthed an ende in Londe. Now think well, Sir Gawain, for woth that thou art ne wonder this adventure for to frame that thou hast tan on honde. Taken in hand, hand on to. It's close enough, right? And if you read this and if you read it aloud, you can sort of guess. It sounds like it's somebody with a strange dialect, but it's not. It's recognizable. So it's easy to translate in that sense. Sometimes the narrator, the translator, has to find good words in English, but it's not that hard. And so it's actually nice to read in the medieval English. It's sort of fun. But it does, sometimes you don't know what is being said, so that's the problem. Anyway, I like Tolkien's translation. I think it's very good. And he picked up what I like here. He did not lose the sense of the fae. The green man is a fae man. It's the realm of the fairy. This is a big deal for Tolkien, if you know anything about Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings and so forth, and the realm of fairy, very much important to him. Yes?
This is a slight aside, but would you consider, because I saw this as a conversation, would you consider the works of Tolkien like an epic at all?
Like the Lord of the Rings?
Like the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I think there's some epic features to it. I wouldn't consider it an epic in the Greco-Roman sense, but there are features of it. So there's no gods in the Lord of the Rings. But there is a descent into the underworld. there's an element of the supernatural there. There's an element of the fairy there. I mean, it's an epic in the same sense of the worldview seems to be a bit like this, but there's no mention of Christ either. So it's put in almost the timeline of Beowulf, but without the Christian perspective even. And so I think he's engaging with the epic. Whether I could consider it an epic, I think you could make a case for it, for sure. Yeah. I'm not sure he's trying to write an epic, but he might be trying to write a saga. There's some similarities there. He's very much influenced by Norse mythology and sagas there, and you can see features of that. But yes, I mean, Tolkien's the translator, right? Also of Beowulf, he's the one who makes Beowulf part of the canon of English literature. And so he is casting a very English sense of what an epic is there, and it's connected with freedom, interestingly, unlike the other epics. The ancient world, not so much so. Here it is, and in The Lord of the Rings, there's a sense of freedom from the tyranny of the ring, and the ring of power, and the themes there are intertwined with it. So yeah, I think you could make a case that it's an epic. But we're not reading it on this course, sadly. But I will do it in my science fiction sub-creation course I teach next semester. You can't take it because you're in first year, but in year 3 you can take it. I'll offer it again. Very popular. And I'll take it in the context of science fiction then as well. Anyway, enough for now.